Hey everybody, Qroo here. Welcome to the channel. I'm still traveling around Mexico. That's why I don't have the polished look of my later videos in front of the black screen where all the text comes out. I do like that format. But I didn't want you to miss out on a Spanish lesson, so I decided to do one here that I think you're really going to benefit from. It doesn't matter if you're a beginning student or an intermediate student. You're going to get something out of this because what I'm going to show you is a really useful grammatical construction, like a plug-and-play phrase that you can use in a wide variety of translations. And we're going to be starting with very simple translations for those folks at the beginning level. And then I'm going to show you how to create more complex grammatical constructions with this same base. And that's going to take us up through our intermediate students. So you folks can also get something out of this lesson. In the end of this thing, we're going to have a really cool, complex grammatical construction, and it's going to use the subjunctive mood. Yes, the subjunctive mood. You know that's my favorite mood. This is what I'm going to be teaching you today. It's just two words, lo suficientemente. And this is how we're going to be translating enough in English. Not, that's enough of that, but rather something is enough of something. For example, big enough, strong enough, brave enough, large enough, small enough. That kind of enough is what we're going to be translating. Anytime we have that, we're going to be using lo suficientemente. Here's an example of that. La casa es lo suficientemente grande. The house is big enough. Now we could have just said la casa es grande. The house is big. But to make it enough, we just drop these two words in. They never change. That's why this is so easy to use and work into our Spanish. La casa es lo suficientemente grande. Now it doesn't matter if the noun is masculine, feminine, plural, singular. It's always going to be lo suficientemente whatever. I'm so confident you can already use this correctly because it's that easy to use that I'm going to put a few Spanish sentences on here. La casa es grande. The house is big. El carro es rápido. The car is fast. And for you folks in Spain, you want to use coche, that's fine, whatever you want to use. Juan es inteligente. Juan's intelligent. Mi español es bueno. My Spanish is good. Las fresas están maduras. The strawberries are mature. Now, what I want you to do is to change these a little. And I want you to say, the house is big enough. The car is fast enough. Juan is intelligent enough. My Spanish is good enough. And the strawberries are mature enough. You think you can do it? I think you can. Go ahead. I'll wait. You really shouldn't have taken that much time because you're never changing lo suficientemente. There it is. There's your translations. La casa es lo suficientemente grande. The house is big enough. El carro es lo suficientemente rápido. The car is fast enough. Juan es lo suficientemente inteligente. Wow, that's almost a tongue twister. Juan is intelligent enough. Mi español es lo suficientemente bueno. My Spanish is good enough. And our last one, las fresas están lo suficientemente maduras. The strawberries are mature enough. Let's say we're baking with them or something. I don't know, but there's some reason they need to be mature enough. Those are super easy, right? Well, those were all adjectives. Let's look at a couple of these sentences. These are actually using adverbs. You speak Spanish well enough. And do you feel well enough? And we get this. You speak Spanish well enough. Hablas español lo suficientemente bien. Now, we're not saying to do what? We're going to be building up to that. Don't worry. Do you feel well enough? ¿Te sientes lo suficientemente bien? You see how this just plugs in? Now we're doing with adverbs, everything else. Now let's make this a bit more complex because we're not saying what these things are big enough for or small enough for, intelligent enough for. We want to expand our vocabulary, right? We're going to be using para. In fact, I'm already fairly confident that you can translate these two sentences. You have, is the house big enough for the party? The garage is big enough for two cars. Okay, our first one, is the house big enough for the party? Es la casa lo suficientemente grande para la fiesta? Not too hard, right? The garage is big enough for two cars. El garaje es lo suficientemente grande para dos carros. Or you could say dos coches, or dos vehículos, dos autos, whatever. Again, the word for car is one of those things that changes by country. Choose a country you like their Spanish and just run with it. Okay, now we're going to make this more complex again. Like I said, I want people at all different levels to get something out of this. We're going to be making this formula now. Lo suficientemente plus your adjective adverb plus como para, keep that together, plus a verb in the infinitive. The infinitive is the unchanged verb. And I know you're already thinking, this formula is getting really long, Paul. Hey, I told you we're going to work through this. This is not that hard. You'll see. With this grammatical construction I just gave you, you're going to be able to translate sentences like this one. And yeah, it's a longer sentence, but just kind of slow it down, break it down. Do you speak Spanish well enough? Let's just do that part. Do you speak Spanish well enough? Habla español. What's next? Lo suficientemente bien, right? What's next on our formula? Como para. So we're going to stick como para in here. Keep these words together, okay? Como para is something I could do an entire lesson on. It's used with this particular construction with a lot of frequency, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in a second. But learn it kind of this way. With the lo suficientemente, what we're talking about, como para, and then a verb in the infinitive, right? So where are we at on this? Do you speak Spanish well enough to? That's where we're at right now. Hablas español lo suficientemente bien como para understand. Understand. Para what? What do you like? Entender, comprender. There's a different ones, right? We'll use entender, to understand. Everything that I say to you. Todo lo que te digo, everything I say to you in Spanish, en español. Just put it all together. Hablas español lo suficientemente bien como para entender todo lo que te digo en español. That was a long sentence, but it's still just this formula, okay? Let's do another one for you. Do you feel well enough to go to the beach? Do you feel well enough to go to the beach? Te sientes lo suficientemente, right? That is a tongue twister a little bit. Te sientes lo suficientemente bien. Now what do? Plug in our como para, right? Now what are we at? Go to the beach. You know how to say go to the beach? Ir a la playa. Put it all together. Oh, gotta put a little question mark at the end. ¿Te sientes lo suficientemente bien como para ir a la playa? Now I'm going to stop this right now and we're going to look at this como para again, because I'm going to tell you that sometimes the como is not there. It may only be para. But, you know, it's probably going to most often be como para. What does the grammar book say? Well, the undisputed champion of what the Spanish language is supposed to be is the Real Academia Española, and what they say is in this construction with lo suficientemente that it can be como para or it could just be para. The como can be optional. But my recommendation is to just learn this formula with como para. So if you see como para with this construction, like in the news or something, you're not going to get confused and trying to translate like, what is the como? It's the like. Don't try to break these words, these phrases down. Think of them as just a concept, like lo suficientemente. I know that's how I'm going to translate enough. The como para, I know that's going to be stuck in there. My son is intelligent enough to be a doctor. My son is intelligent enough to be a doctor. Should we break it down? How do you say my son? Mi hijo es lo, is intelligent enough, right? Es lo suficientemente inteligente to be a doctor. What are we going to stick in there? You could have como para ser. How are you going to say doctor? You could say doctor or médico. I'm going to use médico. Mi hijo es lo suficientemente inteligente como para ser médico. All right. Now, I'm not going to have you translate this one. I'm just going to show you that this is a quote from Steve Jobs. And no, Steve Jobs did not originally say this in Spanish. But take a look at this one. Now that you understand what lo suficientemente means, and you already know how como para is in there, is it easier to translate this sentence than it was before you had this lesson? Okay, now let's take this thing to another level. And And the construction I just gave you is probably the most useful. You can just stick on those infinitives. It's not a big deal. But sometimes that doesn't work, and maybe you have a subject change, or you're going to need to have a verb conjugated at the end. Then you're going to be following this formula. The lo suficientemente plus your adjective or adverb plus como para, or para like we talked about, but I do like como para better, plus que plus the subjunctive mood. Now, if your sentence is in the present or future, something like that, you're going to be using the present subjunctive mood. And if you're talking about something in the past tense, you're going to be using the imperfect subjunctive. I know, this got really complex quickly, didn't it? That's what I'm trying to do. Make a lesson that appeals to students of different levels. I think we might have done it. We might have. So, what does a sentence like this look like? Well, here's one. Here's the title of a book, in fact. Aprende a cocinar. Learn to cook. Lo suficientemente mal. Badly enough. Como para que otro lo haga por ti. So someone else does it for you. So we have our como para like we always did, and here's the que part. Now this que is going to trigger, this is a subject change after que, which means this verb is going to be for otro, right? And haga. That is in the present subjunctive mood and comes from the verb hacer, to make or to do. Now, if you don't know how to conjugate into the subjunctive, I have a video on that, and I'm doing little lessons here and there about the subjunctive to help lead you through it. But it is the keystone to learning Spanish, and you're never going to be really good at Spanish if you do not learn the subjunctive. It is just so intertwined in the language. It's unavoidable, really. But see, there's your construction. Now, I don't expect you to be able to do these as quickly in your head. There's a lot going on here. This is definitely your higher intermediate students that are going to be able to just spit this construction out like this with no problem whatsoever. Now, I know that sounded like a challenge for some folks, and they're like, let me add this thing. I want to go ahead and try to translate one. So here's one you can translate. Take your time with it. Stop the video if you want to. Kind of work it out. And we'll do it more like a bilingual breakdown as we go through it. So hopefully, even if you were not to the level that you can do this in Spanish, you'll still get something out of this part of the lesson. When you're trying to translate a long sentence, it can seem really intimidating at first, but we're just going to break it down into little phrases because that's basically all it is. So at 3 years of age, a los 3 años de edad, your son. Now, we have to make a decision here. Are we going to speak in the informal? Going to speak in the formal? What are we going to do? We'll stick with the formal. So instead of tu, we'll say su. Your son should speak well enough. That should can be done in a few different ways. I'm going to go with debería, right? Should speak well enough. Debería hablar lo suficientemente bien. Never changes. I mean, this stuff's great, right? A los 3 años de edad, su hijo debería hablar lo suficientemente bien. Well, we're going to go back up to our formula, and we're going to pop in como para, right? We have a subject change. We're going to adults, so we know it's que. Como para que. Boom. That's how fast that part will come out after a while because it's just a formula. Let's go to the next part. So adults can understand. So that's our verb can, poder, superverb, right? Para que los adultos, so adults, puedan, because it's subjunctive, right? Entender. So we have the majority. Could go with a couple different ones. You could go with la mayoría or la mayor parte de lo que dicen, or lo que dice. We're talking about one child generally. A los 3 años de edad, su hijo debería hablar lo suficientemente bien como para que los adultos puedan, that's the subjunctive, entender la mayor parte de lo que dice. Did you get that one without any of my help? If you did, seriously, you do not need my class. Just turn it off and go do something else. If you reach a level of Spanish that these are easy, then you don't really even need classes to get better at Spanish. You can just talk to people and watch television, and you're just going to get better on your own. You don't have to make that much of an effort. Okay, take a look at this sentence in Spanish. At first, I was actually going to give you the English translation of this and have you come up with this. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to lose half the people. They're just going to turn this video off. So I think we're going to do this one a little bit differently. So here is the Spanish, and this comes right from a medical website. and it uses this grammatical construction. So can you just read this and understand it? Because if you can, that's great. I just want to highlight what we have right here, because now this is our construction of the day. Lo suficientemente grave, right? And then right after it, we have our como para and the que. So you know right after para que that you're going to have a verb here that's in the subjunctive, and you do. Comiencen is from the verb comenzar, and it is in the subjunctive mood. This is a formula, and you use it over and over and over to create really complex sentences, right? So let's go step by step through this. Si el daño del cartílago es, if the cartilage damage is, and you already know what lo suficientemente grave is, grave enough, como para que, as to whatever, like as to cause, you can kind of think of it that way. Los huesos, the bones, comiencen, to begin, a rozarse entre sí. That's like just rubbing together, right? Rozarse entre sí. Now, with the verb comenzar, you see there's an a in here. And I usually tell people, when you learn a verb, it's always good to learn the preposition that goes along with it. And with comenzar, you're going to have a before another verb. And that is to begin to do something. All right, what else we have? Es posible, it's possible, que, that, la articulación, the articulation is actually a joint. That's pretty easy to remember, I think. Articulación, se inflame. This comes from inflamarse, to get inflamed, and it is also in the subjunctive mood. Now, I haven't done a lesson particularly about this aspect, but after es posible que, anything that'll be in the supporting clause is going to be in the subjunctive mood. Do you see how important the subjunctive mood? It's everywhere. Okay, this is the last thing we're going to do. Here is another headline. 5 razones lo suficientemente convincentes como para que no vuelvas a tomar leche. Do you know what it says? Closest interpretation would be like 5 reasons convincing enough to cause you not to drink milk again, right? So let's take a look at this. There's our lo suficiente and our como para with the que attached, right? So what do we know is going to be after this? This verb in the subjunctive. This actually comes from volver, which means to return. This is actually a pretty cool construction. If you have volver a plus a verb, right? It means to do something again. And that's how it's being used here. So in this sentence, not only did you see how this construction plays out over and over in Spanish with lo suficientemente, como para que, and the subjunctive, but you also maybe learned something new, that volver plus a plus a verb means to do something again. I don't know, maybe you already knew that one. Depends on your level. All right, it's a beautiful day, and my wife wants to go do something because I see she's already signaling me that this lesson's over. So it's over, folks. It's over. But I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you have an amazing day. And until next time, hasta luego.